Normal isn't real. It's just whatever gets rewarded the most. If I ask someone in Sudan, what does a normal person look like? And then I ask someone in Sweden, I guarantee you there'd be two different answers. Normal, it doesn't exist. It literally does not exist. Okay, so welcome to Different is Normal, real talk about neurodivergent lives. And how are you today, Emily?
I'm dysregulated, but
Dysregulated?
I'm okay. I'm good.
Well, that sort of leads us into this topic.
It does.
Which is great. So what we want to talk about today is the fact that normal isn't real. It's just whatever gets rewarded the most. So the first thing I'd like to discuss is where the idea of normal came from. So where did your idea of normal come from?
It was funny, actually, when I was looking through our dot points for today's session. This is one of those questions where, like when somebody says to me, how are you today? Well, that's like such a big question. That's probably because of my neurodivergent brain. It goes, how specific do you want me to be? And so I did what I normally do, and I went to Google and I'm like, what actually is normal? What is it? I was actually quite fascinated. It started out as a mathematical term for consistency. And then it kind of has merged into social construct, like a set of rules that everybody has to abide by and conform to. And that's what determines normal. So for me, I think normal was really like a learnt concept from my environment, like family, school culture, that kind of stuff.
So who decided what was normal when you were growing up?
I think it depended on the environment, right? Like who I am or who I was at home with my family is slightly different to who I was in the classroom, which was also slightly different to who I was in the playground. So what about you? What do you dominated it for
it's
you?
interesting. I mean, I think about when I was younger and what dominated my personality was sport. So sport was cool. And I remember as I got older, it was more about the way you looked and what you did, what you didn't do, what music you listened to. And that to me is what really told me what normal was. And being part of the neurodiverse community became something different until the point I actually realized, well, I don't know. There is no such thing.
Yeah.
There's literally no such thing. I mean, you think about it. If I ask someone in Sudan, what does a normal person look like? And then I ask someone in the middle of Sweden, I guarantee you there'd be two different answers.
Yeah.
And so that's the way I try and think about everything at the moment. So I know there's not a normal. There's literally not a normal. I can't think of anything where I can say, oh, that's normal, because it's not. I mean, I can cook the same chocolate cake 14 times in a row and it won't be the same cake every 14 times. And I'll use the same ingredients, I'll use the same process. It won't be the same, right? And people and personalities and behaviors are exactly the same. So I just, I find that really interesting that normal is a word we use so much, and yet I don't think there's any such thing.
Well, no, and usually when we use the word normal, we end up repeating it, but going normal with our quotation marks.
Exactly right.
Whether you're in the neurodivergent community or not. So I feel like that isn't, like it's a known concept that there is no normal, but in everyday lives, there's still this expectation to meet normal, right?
Did you ever reach normal? Did you ever hit a point where you said, oh, yeah, I'm normal?
No.
And was there anyone when you were growing up in school where you said, oh, that's what normal is?
I mean, I feel like you look at people certainly as a child and a teenager, right? Because you're trying to fit in. You're trying to figure out what your role is in this world, or how you're supposed to react and respond to things. And so you try different things on. So one day you might think that the popular person that's listening to Britney Spears is normal, and then you realize, oh, actually, I really like punk rock or whatever.
What behaviors do you think were praised or ignored in your family or your school life?
Yeah, I think families and schools, like, slightly different. And I think gender plays a big role in that, in terms of family, but maybe also in schools. So if we focus on schools, I think behaviors or characteristics that are praised and looked upon favorably are, compliance and sitting quietly and doing what you're asked and not being disruptive, not interrupting, those sorts of things.
And so speaking from an education support point of view. So, when you're in a classroom and there's a group of students sitting on the ground and you can see one's fidgety or another student might need to say something or any number of things. And so a teacher who doesn't understand neurodiversity will chastise that child and say, can you sit still? Can you be quiet? All the things we've heard, especially when you and I were growing up, that was just expected. Everyone was the same. Whereas now it's perfectly normal. If I see a student in the class who can't sit still or they need to talk, then I will just say, let's just take a moment and go outside. And if I could tell they need to go for a walk, I can think of a student off the top of my head who towards the end of the year was finding it really hard to settle in class. And so every first period of every day, we would go on a little walk around the school and he'd be able to get all these things off his chest and get a bit of exercise so that he'd go back to the classroom and he could sit and he could focus for a while, which was perfect for him. And I think now that that's becoming more than the normal, that everyone else in the classroom was able to benefit from that. And he comes back and he smashes out his work much quicker as a result. And I think changing what we see as normal is making the classroom a much better place for every student, not just the neurodiverse one.
Well, that's it. Because when you make an accommodation for one person, it does benefit everybody. I mean, it certainly benefits the person that needs the accommodation because it's providing them with access to their education or whatever it might be. But everybody benefits from that levity and that acceptance and understanding.
And do you notice with your own students or your own children that there's a real difference between the way they can conduct themselves at school versus at home? So, and that's a massive conversation as a parent I know that I've had with schools, trying to explain that he's spending or she's spending so much time and energy at school trying to put on that mask of behavior and try and be that normal kid that by the time they get home, they crash. They're done. And so as parents, you've got to be able to accept that your child is going to come home and they're either going to crash, or if you say something they don't agree with, they're going to just let you have it because they've been holding on to it so tight all day that they just need to explode. And so as a parent of a neurodiverse child, you need to understand that you're the safe space. So you're going to get yelled at, you're going to get screamed at. Everything that they can say no to, they will, because they know that no matter what, you're going to love them and you're not going to send them to detention. Whereas at school, they've got to put so much effort into behaving and trying to fit the status quo of normal that it's exhausting.
It is.
And so when you have that conversation with the school, they don't understand that there's a real difference between home life and school life. It's almost like they have to be two different people. They've got to put this act on all day and they can be themselves at night, but it's not really their true selves because they're so exhausted and they're so just done with the day. So I don't know about you, but at school, we had a real tough time of when our son got home, he was done. And as a parent, you want to say, oh, how's your day been? And which is a terrible question, by the way.
Yeah.
That's a whole other topic. What did you do today? What's happened? Who did you play with? What did you learn? And we learned that not only are all those questions not really relevant, but he didn't have the energy to be able to answer that. So I would always ask the same question. Eventually I would say something like, what made you laugh today? Or can you tell me something that made you feel like X? And just see if I get one answer back, then fantastic. But often I would get nothing. And as a parent, you have to realize that you might get nothing, right?
Yeah. It's interesting that explosion of feelings at the end of a school day was huge for my eldest and was definitely one of the things that I think prompted going down the diagnosis path initially as well, because that exact thing, the teachers were like, she's great at, she's all these things and she's, and it's all positive. And I'm thinking, but she comes home and she says all these horrible things and bad things happen, and realized, okay, she's holding on to it. And it was really hard as a parent because you're trying to fix it, make it better, whatever. You want to unburden your children from feeling bad feelings. It's interesting you said that you ask one question. Now, one of the things we do is recognize that car trip home, whenever that happens, that is like a decompression chamber where we've basically just acknowledged that when that door closes, before I've even put my foot on the accelerator, she can decompress in that she can just get it all out. And I'm just there to drive that compression chamber home to her safe space. And I don't have to fix it. I don't have to go into fix it mode. I just need to let her nervous system calm down.
Do you find that after she's had that time to decompress, that she's better out the other side? Does she have more energy? Does she have more room to give? Or
well, no, I don't. But she is able to then move into the actions and strategies and tools that she needs to get to that point without getting it out. None of the other strategies of regulation or rest or support can happen because that's the dominating feeling or sensation within her body. It's very clear that she's in fight or flight. And so when she's in that state, there's really nothing that's going to make that better until we get her out of that state.
So given that your daughter was diagnosed quite late, how did you have that conversation? How did that conversation go between this is school life, this is home life, and trying to have everyone on the same page? How did that go?
I am a fix-it person. So I did take on this role of being responsible of trying to make everything better and fix things and work through the problems. A lot of it social, a lot of it academic. And so that became a job. And it was a lot of emails and a lot of conversations with my daughter and then a lot of conversations with my husband and then the two of us together and, blah, blah, blah. And that's just what happened. It was just this continual discussion point with no resolution. I just felt like I was on a hamster wheel the whole time, just running and never getting anywhere. And it was like that for years. So I think that having the diagnosis, having the language and the understanding of what was actually happening allowed me to get off that hamster wheel and start trying different things. The talking and the discussions and the trying to fix the wrong thing. It's not that there weren't issues that needed to be addressed, but I wasn't recognizing the right thing that needed to be fixed.
So if you look back at you growing up, who do you think protected that idea of normal? Why did that exist? What was that at school? Like, how did that come about?
I think school is this dynamic of one to many. And so if we look at, this definition of normal being like a set of rules for conformity, being normal in school helps the system in that you've got to provide so many things to so many people and there's just one of you. And so having that normal default in place in the classroom specifically is important. And this isn't to say that schools are doing it wrong necessarily. They're doing the best they can. They're undervalued, under-resourced, disrespected, all of that. But essentially everything is measured against that normal. And so if you sit outside of that, then it's only looked upon as being negative because the baseline is normal, which is conformative. And so it's systematic. It's social, but it's systematic. What do you think? What's your experience?
I think the idea of normal protects or attempts to protect the majority. And I think that we're coming to realize that the majority isn't really a majority of a great mass. It's getting smaller and smaller. And I think there's more diversity and we're recognizing diversity more. And I think probably back when we were growing up, normal was considered to be, 90%, 95% of students would fit into what we classed as normal. When realistically, it's exactly the same as it is now. But now we recognize the fact that there's so many differences. And so I think back to when I was in high school or primary school as well, the students that behaved in particular ways or had issues with particular things. And now with my experienced hat on, with all the experience of ASD and ADHD and every other thing and working in classrooms, I can now see clearly the students that I can still remember to this day. I know, yes, if you'd just had this support, your life would have been so much easier for you. And I wish that I could go back in time and say, can we help this person with this? But obviously you can't. So that's what education support is for me. It's my chance to try and right as many of those previous wrongs as I possibly can. That to me is probably where the idea of normal came from. And you're only taught normal by your teachers and by your parents, right? So, if I remember a student who really struggled to sit still and stay quiet, and you could put an ADHD just sticker on his head. But we didn't do that back in those days, didn't even know what it was. And I remember the teacher used to get angry at him for not being able to sit still or not be able to do this and that. And if he'd just been able to regulate himself and they'd provided that support,
Yeah.
everyone would have benefited. And just to be able to do that now, I think's fantastic. We've still got a long way to go, obviously, but we've come a long way as well.
Yeah.
So I sort of gets me thinking about something else when we're thinking about normal is normal for us when we were growing up for having friends and playing is that, we used to call on the phone and probably your parents would answer, oh, can I please speak to Emily? And they'd say, oh, hello, Dave, how are you? And, you go through that whole thing and then you'd speak on the phone and you'd organize a play date and all that sort of stuff. Whereas now it's on the phones and parents, we don't necessarily get a look in, and especially at high school. Look, we had a 13th birthday here yesterday for our daughter and only one parent, I think, came in, maybe two parents. So you don't get that same social side of things. But the biggest change, I think, and I'm going to talk about COVID, even though it's a few years ago now, but that changed the dynamic of friendships, I think, possibly for the next several generations, if not forever, in that we became a very online society. And so my daughter at 13 and my son who's 16, they communicated a lot with their friends online because in Melbourne we weren't allowed to socialize, and we spent a long time not being able to socialize. And so that became the norm. As a result, it's pretty much still the norm. Like online conversations are the norm. So rather than going and meeting somewhere, which the kids still do, they more often than not meet online, which is good or bad, take your pick.
Yeah.
For our son, who's 16, who has autism, greatest thing of all time. It was the best part of life was COVID for him because he had to be able to control his own shell, be able to control his communication, and didn't have the distraction of a classroom and a whole bunch of people around. And so now, if you'd asked me 10 years ago what normal friendships are, I would say my friendship, right? This is my bias. It's going into the park and kicking the football. It's going down the street with your friends and, buying $1 worth of mixed lollies, which once upon a time was a lot.
You could do, yeah.
And all those sorts of things, buying fish and chips and all that sort of stuff and going down to the park and sitting there and eating it and playing with your friends. Whereas for him, that's not a thing. It's not something he's interested in doing. He doesn't want to have those personal relationships. They're way too much for him. But he has a massive online social life. It's incredible. And I sit there and I listen to him talking to his friends and he laughs, and his friends from all over the world. I mean, can you imagine at 16 us having friends all over the world? It just wouldn't happen.
No.
And he speaks about so many different topics. He's got this passion in anime. He loves anime. He loves making characters. He loves making voices. And so what's normal for me as far as friendships go is that normal, it doesn't exist. It literally does not exist, because the relationships that I have with my friends are very different to the relationships that he has with his friends. And no relationship is more right than the other, right? They're all different types of relationships, and that's fantastic. So the normal for me in relationships has changed and broadened incredibly. So what about you? Do you find that with your kids, the relationships have changed?
Yes and no. I think, interestingly, that socializing aspect, my daughter has come to realize what her triggers are, or what her limits are. So previously, she would go for the sleepovers and go to the shopping center, school holidays, and then suffer for it. And I think because of having a diagnosis and an understanding of herself, and me having an understanding, and also her friends too, that's changed deliberately to minimize. And so rather than, for example, in the holidays, most holidays, her two friends and all the mums, we would go into the city, we'd go shopping, go and have something to eat and see a show, and then come home. And she would have panic attacks by the middle of the day. It was just too much. It was too much going on. And I didn't realize, I didn't really understand it, because she was loving it. She was having a good time, and she was getting angry. She would say, I want to do this. She wants to be normal. I want to do what my friends are doing, but she couldn't. And I didn't understand it. I didn't know how to make it better. And so over time, we were able to figure out ways where she could interact with her friends in a way that she felt she wasn't completely missing out, but that wasn't having a detrimental impact on her well-being. So it might mean, rather than going shopping, we would meet them at somewhere to eat that was safe. She knew what was on the menu. She knew she could eat there. And then we'd go to the show. I would make sure I parked my car nice and close to the theatre so it was a super quick walk. We do things like book seats in the middle so that we can wait for everybody to leave so we're not, in a crowded group, all different things like that. Have snacks and drinks and stuff in the car for the trip home, decompress on TikTok or whatever it might be. Like those aspects have changed, but she's still been able to socialize. But it's not always perfect. She still wants to do things and then does them, and it doesn't work out.
Unfortunately, it's par for the course, isn't it?
It is, and it's about understanding that that's okay too.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all have. That's what I try and say to my kids. We all have times when we don't want to do something or we can't take it or whatever. I have times when it's just too stimulating. Like, I can't do this. I need to go, and that's normal for everyone.
Yes, that's right.
So maybe I found something that is normal.
Yeah, well, everybody is different.
Yeah.
Hence,
exactly.
Normal is different. Different is normal.
So I want to talk about how schools reward sameness. So what kind of students do you think get praised more often? So for me, I noticed that at my school, we give awards to students. And actually, I'll even take it back a step. So at primary school, every week, there'd be a student of the week.
Yeah.
And in prep, you'd get it for smiling nicely or something like that. And as you got older, it would get more and more important, I guess. And I remember that our son didn't get a heap of them towards the end of school. And the school made a really big effort to make sure every student got it at least once.
Okay.
But when it got to the second half of the year, didn't really get anything. And I don't think the school recognizes how important it is, not only for the student, but for the parents to see that recognition. And it's not a case of you want them to be in front of the class and get an award and all that sort of thing, but you want them to feel as if they're part of the greater scheme. And if they're not getting student of the week and Joe or Jessie are getting student of the week twice, then it doesn't seem like it's a fair playing field, especially when you're only getting student of the week because you were able to do your shoelaces up twice this week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so high school now, we're recognizing students who do really well, which is fantastic. I think we should. That's great. You're doing really well in the maths. Fantastic. Great. But we've got a whole set of students who, for them, a huge achievement is getting to school. A huge achievement is being able to, at my son's school, they had to wear ties. So he was able to wear his tie loose. That's huge. For him to be able to do that was amazing. And he didn't feel comfortable not having his jacket on. So he would get hot and sweaty. And then for him, the toilets were too smelly. They were too dirty. He couldn't understand how people could leave their bathrooms in such a state. So he refused to go. And so luckily the school gave him his own bathroom to share for people who had particular needs. And that was great, but there's no recognition for that. There's no, you've done so well. Like for me, a student who's really good at maths and works really hard at maths, it's just as important to recognize a child who struggled so hard to get to school, and my gosh, they made it and they got through the whole day and they did their work. My goodness.
Yeah.
That's huge. I mean, I've got a student now who comes to school, initially came to school for, there's 6 periods in a day. So he came for 4 periods and then he dropped back to 2 because it was all a bit too much. But we're slowly building him up. And initially he wouldn't sit in the classroom.
Yeah.
So we would sit just outside the classroom and sort of participate that way. And as the year went on, we got him in the classroom, and he's very much like my son in that it's, when something comes up that interests him, he'll just jump right in. Otherwise, he'll say nothing. And we had a few topics where he was just, he just like, and I've got a sweet spot for him because I can see how hard he's trying and how difficult he finds it. But he gets no recognition for that. Like to me, for him coming in 4 periods a day, that's enormous. Put a medal around his neck. That's huge. Unfortunately, as schools, we still don't recognize that. And I'd love to find a way that we can recognize that. So there's parents who, you know what it's like, right? So it's not a case of get your child to go downstairs and have their breakfast, get ready for school. So we're going to leave at 8 o'clock and get ready. That's not the way it works. It's, I've got to know exactly what breakfast we're having in the morning. I've got to know exactly how it's prepared. Is there going to be, what drink is going to be with it? What I'm having in the lunchbox. Make sure the bag is packed properly. Got to make sure that the clothes are in the right place. If they're the wrong socks and they're not comfortable, they're not going to get worn. So there's a whole list of steps that you go through every night prior to the day before to make sure you've got everything right. And then you do the same thing again in the morning. And then you spend the whole day looking at your mobile to make sure that the school hasn't contacted you to let you know that something's happened and you need to raise something, come pick them up or whatever. And I think that if we can find a way to recognize those students who are putting in so much effort, and those parents. So if my son was to get an award saying, well done for whatever, just to have that come home, and then for us to be able to go, okay, we're all getting somewhere. We're moving forward. We're helping. I think that's really important and not something we do yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. The reward type system within schools is interesting. As you're saying, the student of the week or the sticker charts or whatever they do. And they're well intended. I understand the intention behind them, but because the default is this conforming baseline that doesn't take our neurodivergent kids or otherwise any slightly different into account, it doesn't make it equitable. Because those kids are never going to be able to achieve that. And that's really damaging. And I think what ends up happening is there are kids that just don't get there. But there are other kids who will mask, who will, we talked before about fight or flight, but there's also the situation where you might freeze or fawn, right? Silence and compliance doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing the right thing or that they're doing well or that they're good. And so on the outside, they might look like they're conforming, but on the inside, they're just masking and things aren't going well. And so, I don't know, I almost feel like rewards are this double-edged sword. I don't know. I don't want to say I don't agree. I don't agree with rewards. I agree with recognition. I think that we have to make a distinction between recognition and reward.
So do you think that routines and rules favour some kids more than others?
I think,
Well, let me start for you. Okay. So we start school at 8:30. And for adolescents, that's not a great time to start. And if you've got a whole bunch of other complicated issues that go with that, that time is not in a student's best interest. So you'll notice students going to school who are exhausted. They have too much going on in their brains to be able to start work. So one of the things we did last year was ask students what rules they would change if they could change school rules. And overwhelming majority was that they would start later. And we talked about in some countries they're doing 4 days of schooling, and we also explained those days are longer. So that was a bit of a trade-off. And I think that if you're a student who can get up and get ready on time and be ready to go, then the regular school day is neither here nor there. You can do that easily. I know for us, it was a real struggle. And having 2 periods with a break, 2 periods and a break, and then 2 periods was also a big day. And especially if the periods were double, so the same subjects. And I noticed that with my students that if we have a double, by the time we're getting through halfway through the second period, they're really struggling. Whereas if you've got individual classes for each of those periods, it's good because you get a break, you get to walk to a different classroom, which is nice. And I think that having those set of rules and those bell times and having to do things at particular times definitely favors what we can say as neurotypicals, yes. And I think that's one of the major reasons we pulled our son out of school, because those times didn't work. And I think it certainly doesn't favor the kids who need a bit of extra time for this. And also the way classrooms are structured don't favor everyone. So when you and I were growing up, classrooms were single rooms with a door that you would go into and you would exit out of the same door, and there was no other ways to get in or out. Then we went through this open classroom policy where we'd join 2, 3, 4 classrooms together, be able to open up the walls and everyone could intermingle, which meant there's obviously more noise, more distraction, all that sort of thing, which doesn't work for all students either. Now we're going back to almost like a hybrid where we have some classrooms that are by themselves, some that are open. And from experience, the open classrooms for the neurodiverse kids are a real struggle. They're a noisy environment. There's too much distractions. By the time that student has tried to numb all those external sources, getting to the work is too much. So obviously it works for the majority of the neurotypical students, but for those of us focusing on the neurodiverse, it doesn't. So that's one of the rules I think favors those sorts of students, is that we have all these different things that we try. Why we keep trying all these different things, I don't know. There's probably a reason for it. Someone needs a job, I don't know. But I think that definitely favors the majority.
Yeah. It's interesting. One of the, I guess, strategies that I've been using recently, so my daughter has had a lot of trouble in the high school setting for the reasons that you were like talking about. Lots of transitions, different teachers, just constant change is probably one of the big challenges that she's faced. And so, and because there's all these rules, you've got to do this here and there and whatnot. And I've been asking myself this question, do we have to? Is this necessary? Is it essential? Is it true? Those sorts of questions. So for example, music. While she loves music, the way that it's taught at school, way too overwhelming. Everybody had it at the same time. Even if you're in different rooms, you've got strings in one and horns in another and all of that. Way too much. People are, as you know, when you're in a music classroom, it's not like in a professional orchestra. Kids will play their instruments generally not very well at the entire time, and you have 150 kids doing that. Complete sensory overwhelm. And so I just said, well, do we have to? Like, do you want to be a musician? Do you want to, is this something that you want to learn?
Yeah, this is the passion you want to.
Yeah, and it isn't. It wasn't. It was, no, I don't want to do that. I'm like, okay. So then I asked the school, do we have to? Does she have to do music? These are the reasons why she's struggling to do it. And they said, well, no, she doesn't. So she doesn't do music.
So we had the same situation with our son, with PE and music. And so we said, well, you don't need to do those things. That's not something you're going to pursue. That's not something that is essential to your schooling. While it's great to be exposed to music and to be exposed to different types of sports, it's not essential, and it's not going to make any difference to your life in the long run. So the school was like, yep, that's fine. We'll give him quiet time. So he used to go and sit in the library during those things. He'd be able to read, or he'd be able to continue with the work that he had outstanding, which was great, which meant that we tried to make those into get rid of homework time. He never did it. He'd always just utilize the opportunity to read a book or talk to his friends, whoever was there. Yeah, because generally speaking, who were in those libraries at those times? Same sorts of kids with the same sorts of issues that could relate, which is great. So I think as a parent, you need to understand that you can totally have those conversations with your school and they will be understanding. And if they don't understand those situations, maybe it's not the right school.
Yeah, change it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And because the thing is, if you don't address the thing that is making the impact, then the flow-on effect is that the subjects that they are passionate about, that are their strengths, are equally impacted. If she's having to go to music first thing in the morning and it's having such a huge impact on her that she can't stay at school, well, then she's not going to English and she's not going to history and she's not going to art because she can't. And even if she is, she's so dysregulated and so overwhelmed, she's not learning anything anyway.
100%.
So if we take the challenges out of the equation, it means that they can work and meet their full potential and be successful.
That's what every parent needs to know, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the most important rules you can learn as a parent, is that you can go in and advocate and say, this isn't the right thing, and the school will listen.
Yeah.
Especially these days. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
They're really good. So when you've been working in a classroom and you've seen that a teacher is really open all the things that you suggest as an education support staff. What differences do you see in the classroom with students?
I think the biggest change is engagement. Comfortability, safety is the most important. As a education support worker, your touch points are quite holistic. So yes, you're there to support the teacher, but you're also there to support all of the students, not just the neurodivergent students, or the students that need additional support. And so working with the teacher collaboratively, which is our teacher's favourite word, you see improvements for those students that were struggling or falling behind or not having their needs met, maybe not coming to school, maybe not engaging in the work. But you also see improvements and better engagement levels and understanding of the other students. And also the students that are the quiet, compliant ones that maybe you didn't pick up on.
Yeah.
Go, "Oh, actually, because I let that child use a fidget toy and they were sitting next to this child and they used a fidget toy, look how much better their quality of work was, or how interesting their thoughts were that they got down on the paper."
And you were at primary school.
Primary school,
Yeah,
yes. And in terms of high school, as a parent perspective, being able to provide accommodations for my daughter in conjunction with the teacher has meant that she's actually created these most amazing pieces of schoolwork that would otherwise never have happened. Nothing would have happened. And so it enabled the teacher to finally see and understand what she was capable of.
Yeah.
And it also allowed my child to see what she was capable of, to be able to go, "Oh yeah, I can do this." It just doesn't look like how the other kids have done it.
It's interesting. We have, so for example, if I think about English class, so our English teacher is really good about allowing students to work with their passion. So one of the students that I work with quite closely, I'm sure I've talked about him before, is that he loves penguins.
Yeah.
So if the class is writing a particular story or they need to read some text and then answer some specific questions or write about it, we will always rewrite whatever that is into penguins, which is great. And we do the same thing for maths. So rather than 2 times 2, for example, it might be we've got an igloo we need to build and we need to build it with this many parts and X, Y, Z. And that gets him really engaged. And the school is totally open to having all those sorts of things done. But by the same token, teachers don't always have the time to do that. So it's often the ES staff who will need to create these things. So depending on how many students you have that you need to do all the additional items for, it can be quite an amount of work. But if you're able to do the work, then it makes life so much better. And I think as a parent, I know that if we get a task, so for example, our son might get an English task and it'll be write about this. And if it's something that he feels really, if he has a real objection to it, he's very black and white, yes and no. I will not talk about that. I just won't. Whereas if we speak to his English teacher and we say, he's having a real difficulty with this topic, are we able to choose a different topic? Those teachers will say, absolutely. Choose something that he's passionate about. All we want to know is how he can write, how he can express himself. Those are the most important things. So as a parent, if you see your child is struggling with whatever topic, if you can go to your teacher and not only say, this is an uncomfortable problem, but this is a suggested solution that we think might work. More often than not, you're going to get that teacher say, oh, absolutely, that's great, let's do that. And I think the parents need to be able to jump on the front foot and say, okay, you're having trouble with this, let's go to speak to the teacher and get this done.
Yeah, I think focusing on what's the goal, like what's the intended outcome, rather than focusing on the path to get there.
Absolutely.
Because ordinarily the path is going to look completely different. But if the end goal is met,
exactly,
then it's met. Yeah, what do I say? Is this working? No, change it. Is it working? Change it again. Because there's no point in trying to do things the way that everybody else is doing it and never getting there.
Exactly. I mean, it's like if you're sitting with a student or even your own child and you're trying to teach them something and say it's maths, and you'll show them the way that's in the textbook, for example, and it doesn't click. And so you go, okay, how can I teach this differently? You come at it from a different angle. No, that doesn't work. You come at it from a different angle. Doesn't work. You'll eventually find the angle that you put it down on paper and they say, oh, that's how it works. And you get that light bulb moment, which as a teacher or an ES or a parent is one of the greatest feelings you can ever have, right?
Yes.
Watching your child just go, huh.
Yep.
You go, yep. And it's all about just understanding that not everyone understands information the same.
Absolutely.
You know, you might remember something that I say to you, but if I write it down, you won't remember it to save yourself. And we're all different, right? So it's about adapting the learning for the student, which is something we didn't used to do back in the day.
Well, no. And that incidental learning, which probably happens a little bit more in the primary school context just because the environment allows that to happen. And little kids are less worried about play-based learning. But I remember working with this one student and really significant pathological demand avoidance profile. Very strong need for autonomy, huge sensory challenges, adverse to writing things down using pens and paper and anything like that. So a lot of things, a lot of barriers, and really not feeling safe in the classroom. So very regularly fleeing. And I remember this one day that we were doing a maths exercise where the students were needing to create arrays with blocks, or they could choose whatever they wanted to do, find something in the classroom to make an array. But it did need to involve pencil and paper to write down next to it what they were. And this student was playing with cars and not wanting to engage at all. And I found these little glass pebbles and I said, oh, I wonder if these glass pebbles can be mechanics. And you drive your car into the garage and the mechanic can come and fix the car. And so I demonstrated an array with these little mechanics and just really simple. One mechanic on each wheel, did that array. Oh, this car's really bad. Let's do 2 on each wheel. And then, you know, it went like that. And then I said, oh, what if you fix my cars and you become the mechanic? And we did a role change. And we did that for about an hour until the bell went and it was lunchtime. And he didn't want to leave. He didn't want to go to lunch, which was never a problem before. But he was able to demonstrate that he understood the concept of arrays. He didn't realize that he was doing what everybody else was doing. He was just doing it in a different way. And it was just about harnessing that energy, that interest, that engagement in something he was already doing and finding a way of incidentally integrating the curriculum.
And I love that you tell that story and you're glowing about it. Like I can still see
Oh my God.
You're right there.
He's just the best. I adore him.
And so do you notice like a behavior shift when kids know they're being watched versus not being watched?
Oh, definitely. I think neurotypical kids, when they know they're being watched, comply for the most part because they know the rule. The rule is to do these things, to sit still, sit quiet, all of that. The neurodivergent kids feel the pressure. They may still follow the rule of sitting still, but internally it's having a significant impact on their nervous system.
I know from experience that, for example, our son in the classroom, and I've got students like this at school, will put himself in the very back corner and have it in a way that no one can get behind him. And teachers generally look at that and they think, oh, he's doing something that he shouldn't be doing. And that's always people's first thought, he's hiding something. And I have students like that at school, and some of them are hiding something, let's be honest. For him, it's about, that's my private space. Why are you encroaching on my private space? And so I think we need to understand that there are kids like that, and he knows if he's being watched, like the reason he wants to get to the back of the classroom is that he hates eyes on him. That feels like daggers coming at him. So he doesn't want eyes on him. He never raises his hand to ask a question because he knows that means that everyone would look at him. So there's all those types of things we need to be aware of in the classroom. And as a parent, we need to make sure that we understand those things because, if you go to a parent-teacher review and the teacher says, oh, they're always at the back corner and they're not talking to people and those sorts of things, you can say, well, the reason that does happen is because of.
Yes.
So I think that's something as a parent, as an ES, that I'm hyper aware of these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to tell you a story. I don't know if you remember I told you that Holly and I wrote letters to every parent in prep in grade 1, 2, 3, 4. So I found that letter during the week. And for the most part, I loved it. But there was something in there that at the time I thought was right. Now looking back, I am almost ashamed that I wrote it. And one of the things was, you might notice that our son doesn't look you in the eye when he talks. And then I said, but that's something we're working on. Because at the time, that's what I was told by experts, but that's what we should do.
Yeah.
And I realized not long after that, and that was only in the first letter, not long after that, but that's not good for him. So just to explain to people who don't understand, looking someone in the eye is extremely, extremely difficult for someone who is looking at all your details. So if you just concentrate on someone's face, their eyes are moving, their eyelashes are moving, the way their mouth moves, their cheeks, there's so much going on that you're trying to understand that it become too much. So it's easier to look away. And we learned early on that our son couldn't deal with looking people in the eye. So we made no attempt to force him to do that. And as a result of that, when I speak to anyone, now do not look them in the eye for very long. So I don't know if you notice, but I look away a lot because I know that it can make people feel uncomfortable. And if you're spending your time in our conversation trying to figure out my face because I'm looking you in the eyes, then it's not a real conversation. It's just me talking at you, right?
Exactly.
So that's one of the things that I think is a difference that I now see as something that I've learned, and that I make a real effort to make sure that I don't put anyone ever on the spot of having to look me in the eye. And if you don't look me in the eye at all, it makes no difference to me whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like difference feeling safe or feeling safe about difference is a work in progress. There's not like a single sudden moment where I went, great, I'm different. That's fine. I feel good in this world. And same for my kids too. Yeah, so it's definitely a process. But there are a couple of things or a few key strategies or moments where I feel like impacted that. Number one is definitely becoming a parent, because all of a sudden you're responsible for this entire human and you're experiencing the world through their eyes and you're wanting to protect them. And so you're viewing the world differently. And then when you realize, diagnostically or not, that there's some differences and that the world isn't quite built for them, then you start to see normal and different in a new way. So I feel like that was a big turning point. Language is huge, making sure that I have the right language to describe and communicate effectively when you have an understanding of what's going on.
100%. And the words that you choose for the most simple things, it makes a massive difference.
Huge difference, huge. But also if you can name an experience or if you can name a feeling or whatever it might be, and you have an understanding of what it is, then it takes away the judgment or the shame or the guilt or the fear, because you understand it. Community, which I know we touched on last week, but hearing other parents say things like, oh yeah, us too, or surrounding yourself with people that understand, it's that new normal, right?
Absolutely.
The new normal that is different for everybody, but you have this community around you that are all experiencing the world in a similar way.
Honestly, the new normal is difference.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. And they're not judging you either.
No, exactly right.
They are not judging you. And then I think the big one, which is definitely the one that is work in progress, is acceptance, but like proper, real, like radical acceptance. being able to acknowledge what is, what's true, what's real, rather than what's a social construct or what's someone you don't know what anybody's thinking or what anybody's really expecting of you. You only really know within yourself.
Sometimes you don't even know that.
And so allowing myself time to really thoughtfully think about what's happening or what I'm feeling or what my child is feeling or thinking, and then only really focusing in on what I can change, because I can't change the world. I can't change the education system, but I can make small adjustments and accommodations or stop doing things.
Yeah, well, I mean, you start by changing your own household, right?
Yeah.
And then you try and expand that to your school environment. You try and expand it to your social environment, and you slowly outwardly put your version of what normal is, because we've all got different versions of normal, right? So I think that's why having communication with everyone is so important. So to end this podcast, I'm going to ask you one big question. What would your ideal version of normal be?
Difference.
If I said to you that in 2026, normal is difference, does that hit the spot?
It does. Yep.
I think if everyone took that home, that'd be the best lesson to learn, right? If you just accept everyone as they are, the world would be amazing. So normal is difference.
Normal is difference.
What differences are now your new normal? We'd love to know. So please email us, post below, any kind of socials. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much, Em.
Thanks, Dave.
See you soon.
See you.
Cheers.